Hi, Misha here, and I had intended to kind of go on a hiatus or vacation or video slowdown for August, and that's still the plan as I mentioned in the previous video, but I was kind of waiting for this next batch of Swiss guns, Swiss SIGs from Newhausen to come in through JDI Sand Imports, and well, they're here. We're going to talk about 4 variants. The 553SP, which people have been wanting all of 2024, the 553LB, which has kind of always been a personal favorite of mine, the classic 551SP, and the 551LB, this one here. And I wanted to start the video off with this configuration. We'll get into each one in detail, because this is rare. We've never seen one before with a couple of these features. Now, it might catch your eye that it does have diopter sights, including the flip up low light sight here, or flip down, in addition to this pick rail from the factory. Now it's in all black, and it does have a steel lower. Before, most of your black ones had an alloy lower, so that's already pretty neat. It has all your regular features, takes standard magazines, even has the loop for a bayonet lug, although it doesn't come with one installed. Standard handguards, medium length gas system. But the barrel is quite interesting on this jobber. For the first time ever on a 551, we have 2 features. First, a 4-way gas regulator. So you have standard and adverse, and you have fully off, and then you have a suppressor setting. And the reason this has a suppressor setting, also really for the first time ever, we have a 2-piece long barrel. Yeah, this Rotex flash hider, 3-pronger here, that you usually see on the 552s and 553s is on a 551. This is on 14x1 left-hand threads. And in theory, you could unscrew it and use your suppressor with the proper gas setting. And what's really neat about this was in no way expected. In fact, Dave himself did not notice this until these had already shipped. And he called me and said, "You're not going to believe this." Because typically you have a single piece barrel where the flash hider is integral on the 551LB and usually the 551SB too. But we'll get into the differences and all that good stuff. These Swiss guns, you've seen them on the channel before, but try to give you updates. This takes the standard mags. It does have the horizontal charging handle to work with the pick rail. In a lot of ways, this is kind of the best of the both worlds gun. So we'll talk about the differences, all that good stuff. And if you could, you know the deal by now. Liking, sharing, subscribing, helping out on Patreon, all very welcome. And one reason we are kind of taking August slow is so we can finish up the cabin and finish up the range. But the range tier for Patreons, $25, is still open if you'd like to help contribute, sponsor a target, what have you. Let me know. With that, we'll begin with the 551 LB, chambered 5.56. Well, technically this is, I guess, 5.6 GP90 because it is a 1 in 10 twist. Minor differences. We'll dive into it, then we'll look at the SB version, and then we'll look at the 553s that everyone has been waiting on. So with no further ado, since we've been waiting since March, we'll dive on in. Let's briefly look at the packaging and accessories these come with, and they're all identical. Obviously, they come in the plastic, you know that. The pistol itself, honestly, I actually do care for these cases quite a bit. They're quite nice. Standard belt cleaning kit. 1 factory mag. I think all of these did have the notches. And then we get, not a manual, we get a kind of a waiver card. And then a pamphlet, I guess you would call it. And that's it. I know it seems a little lame, but actually for a while they were coming with no paperwork whatsoever, so little bits better than none. SG551LB. And this was quite a surprise. Originally, this was supposed to have a single piece barrel, gray metal, green furniture. it did not. The first change was all black. I don't know why, but since a lot of foreign users and police users do prefer the all black look, possibly that's just what they were tooled up for. This is the factory finish. From the get-go, they were supposed to have the welded pick rail. It's a long enough section. And then the diopters are standard. We do have the little SIG roundel on the back of the lower. Interestingly, we have the single hook instead of the double. Very standard. Yeah. Somewhat unique, this has a steel lower. Typically, 551s in black had alloy lowers in the past. Either the Swiss mag or the Stanag AR-15 style. Standard handguards with mounting points for pick rails. This is the intermediate length, so shorter than 550, but longer than 552, 553. Interesting that this has that four-way gas regulator. It does have the bulge with spring, and it does have a spot where you could put a bayonet lug. Haven't measured it exactly, but the barrel would be right around 16 inches if you were to unscrew this Rotex, and it is kind of the more plain Jane Rotex three-pronger. And as I said earlier, it's 14 by 1 left hand, so essentially AK underneath. Between the regulator and the threaded muzzle, and even the Rotex, this is one of the few 551s that really is set up to be suppressor ready, silencer friendly, but does not have one on right now, YouTube. Because of the steel lower and the diopter and the rail, it's a little bit heavier than mine, but not bad. Has a good balance point. I like this configuration. It's unique. Originally, the 551 was the so-called headquarters carbine, but it kind of evolved once the Swiss Army itself really decided, even though it passed testing and trials, they didn't need it in the 1990s. But it found a home with police in several versions and variants. In fact, the LB here did not come out until late 90s, maybe? Mid to late 90s. Before that, we had the original, which we're about to look at. But the question folks always ask, how many in total came in? For this exact version and variant, 20. And I'm remind you again, these were supposed to be in mid to late March of 2024. They came in at the tail end of July. That's normal. If you're ordering a Swiss SIG, it will get here, but be patient. And with that, let's kind of move to the original. SIG SG551P. This was the original headquarters carbine configuration. Well, mostly. Again, it's in all black, steel lower, pick rail, diopters, SIG roundel, same magazine, hinged trigger guard, which I think is really cool, for winter mitts, same length gas system. And this, too, has a four-way gas regulator, which would be nice if there was kind of a convenient way to run this suppressed. For this really is the original single-piece, one-piece barrel. That means the flash hider is literally a piece of the barrel. It was machined together. It's not glued on or anything crazy like that. No, it's just part of it. It does have internal threading, but that's really meant for more of a blank fire device, although there are adapters that can let you use it in a bit of a hack job version of a suppressor. But that's about the only way, unless you want to cut the barrel. And it's kind of a shame this wasn't a two-piece as well, because overall length from chamber to the face is 14.3 inches, meaning legally you can't just drop on a shoulder stock without worrying about the NFA. Now, you've got to either put a brace on it, which kind of seems a shame for so close to 16, or you have to file, get a stamp, then put a stock on it. If this were threaded, you could just put on an extended muzzle brake or flash hider, which with this unscrewed, yeah, it'd be about, 13.5 inches, you think? 13.25. So you'd need a little bit of length, probably 2.5 to 3 inches. But if you got kind of a cool long bird cage or something, or even like a faux short suppressor, it'd be all right. But we actually haven't had many 551 SBs in a while. We mostly have seen the 16-inch version and some of the 17.8 LBs. So to get the SB with the correct original length barrel, the 14.3, that was originally trialed out in the 80s and spec'd out as the headquarters carbine, it would have looked like this, except it would have been in Swiss colors, and it would not have had the pick rail section up here. Although they still could mount a detachable rail section with a dovetail and pin system back here. It's pretty cool, honestly. This configuration, SBR notwithstanding, I really do like. Has just such a short and stubby look to it. And it, it really was the first 551 that was released and made some hits with the police. And it was this general configuration that M+M had that were the Louisiana Wildlife Fish and Game trade-ins, which was one of our earliest video projects. One thing I should note, this would be, along with the LB, what you would consider a 551-1. That means it has a 1 in 10 twist. That's why at the beginning of the video I said in passing 5.6 GP90. That's Switzerland's name for their unique loading. Is it interchangeable with 5.56 NATO? Yeah, but to kind of keep their neutrality a little bit, they technically have a different cartridge. And it's a 63 grain round, so actually slightly heavier, but it's a 1 in 10 twist. SIG says that this twist rate, 1 in 10, can stabilize anywhere from 55 grain to 69 grain reliably. So it's not really a concern, and they've used it for decades. So to answer the same question, how many came in? Well, just with the LB, 20 551 SBs came in July of 2024. Before we move on from the 551 intermediate size, I wanted to also point out that some 751s came in. That's the 7.62 NATO 308 version, and it has the same nominal length gas system and takes the same handguards. Now this is my older 751 SOCOM. The current import batch were just the standard Sapper Swiss Arms Precision rifle, but I didn't pick any up this go around. But I just wanted to mention that there were some that came in. These do take their own proprietary mags, and that leads me into a couple of frequently asked questions about shoulder stocks. By the way, perfectly legal. Barrel is over 16 inches on this, so no problemos here. Mine here has the modern adjustable shoulder stock. It has a total of 3 positions. It still folds to the right and uses the same rear section trunnion, if you want to call it that. But most folks want the classic 5.5 folding stock. That's basically the same stock, just not adjustable. And these are available. And when you buy them new, they come complete and ready to install. They have the spring, the pin, the locking block, rubber butt plate. They also have a metal internal frame or skeleton, whereas some of the clones and copies do not. And they usually have a maker's mark in here, and that can vary depending on a few factors, molds and whatnot. So typically the actual Swiss ones tend to feel a little heavier, a little sturdier than some of like the US, Chinese, Israeli clones and copies. But I really do like the adjustable here. When it's fully extended, it's the same length of pull as the standard stock. And fully collapsed, you save about that much. And of course, in between is, well, in between. In Switzerland, that's really good for use with like thick winter clothing or short folks like me. The only problem is when it's like that, when it's collapsed in, it won't line up with the latch on the side. So you do need to extend it fully to pop it in. But to be fair, since the adjustable stock is a much newer advent than the original, it's fine. I would say general rule of thumb, and Switzerland would allow users to order them however they want, but generally the rule of thumb is if it's a pick rail, adjustable. If it's a classic diopter gun, classic stock. Although since we're talking about the diopter plus pick rail, I think it's a, hey, whatever the hell you want. And one final common question I get asked, when you get these stocks, they do not come with the hinge pin. However, this is direct from Neuhausen. The pin that retains the end cap is perfectly fine, perfectly safe, perfectly strong, perfectly normal to just reuse as a hinge pin for your shoulder stock or your arm brace adapter. You might want that little cup spring. Personal experience with it when it's a steel lower, I like to put in that spring, but I have found with some of the alloy lowers, putting that spring in there makes things maybe too tight. Again, it's just there to tighten things up. If you don't have the spring in, you absolutely aren't going to hurt anything. I'm just saying that because more than a few people have worried that if they install the stock without the little cup spring, they could somehow do damage. And I get it. It's an expensive gun, a big investment. You don't want to screw it up, but no worries, you won't. Your stock just might flop around a little bit more, not when it's locked or latched, but in between. The whole point of that spring is basically so your stock will pretty much just stand on its own. I mean, obviously when it's close to the hinge point, it'll still go, but you know, keeps it from just flopping around if it gets unlatched. But when it's locked up, no problem. And honestly, this adjustable stock, it's a good tight fit. So with that, covering the intermediate guns, let's move into the main attraction. SIG SG553LB. This is the shortest production length gas system. First begun with the 552 and carried on with the 553 and its variants like the 553R and 553-300 Blackout. This has about a 13.7 inch barrel, and it's a traditional single piece with the permanent muzzle device, internally threaded, grenade hump, and a slot for a bayonet lug. It does have a 4-position regulator, and as you can tell, this is in classic European OD green and gray with a steel lower. These are not marked commando. Typically, the 13 point whatevers aren't really considered the commando. It does have the pick rail and diopters and SIG roundel. That's all pretty standard. Comes with the same mag. All that good stuff. These guns have all matching serials, upper and lower. By the way, the upper is a registered firearm part on an SG55X gun. The lower is just a trigger housing, so it's kind of like the FAL situation. The bolt carrier has a number, and more recently, by Swiss ruling, law, regulation, the barrels have serials usually. That's kind of cool though for collectors. Same low light sights. The diopter has 4 positions in the rear, plus a removable iris, where you can put in a target peep. Same internal threading for a blank fire. And these, unlike the 551s, these are considered 553-2s, meaning they have a 1 in 7 twist. Which, considering it's a shorter barrel, okay, that makes sense. But Typically, the Swiss military doesn't use -2s. They still stick with the -1s no matter which version. -2s are for export, be it commercial, civilian, or military, select fire, what have you. Within the Swiss armed forces, your average soldier has a STGW-90, so still a standard SG550 with its 21-inch barrel. There aren't really many 551s, if any. And the 553LB specifically is kind of used as their carbine, carried by, section leaders, squad leaders, maybe patrol, police. I think some of the paratrooper units carry these. So they're not all that common, but they're not super duper rare either. And they're still buying these today from SIG Neuhausen, formerly SIG, then SAN, and last few years back to being SIG again. Technically SIG Sauer GmbH. So yeah, these are very much found within the Swiss Army, although instead of being in the hands of reservists and people just serving their time, they tend to be more in leaders' hands and the professional soldiers. And in some ways, this might be kind of my favorite look. I just like it. It looks neat. Oh, fun fact, these handguards, notice this divot and this kind of truncated cut here in these holes. They make 553 handguards by just cutting down standard 550 handguards. Interesting that the 551 gets its own mold, but when it comes to the 553s, and before that the 552s, they just, do what they've got. In fact, at least in the past, these holes drilled for ventilation were essentially hand drilled. I think today they use actual things, but, hey, fun. So to answer the question, how many of these came in? 15 SG553-2s, LBs, came in. So the smallest number so far. And this is an interesting gun. It's kind of hit or miss on sales. When they're hot, they're hot. Then people often overlook them, and then they want them. If I didn't mention it, the Swiss military designation is STGW-07. The prior 552 was called the STGW-04. And with that, even though this is the main attraction, let's come to the absolute star of the show. SIG SG553SB, often called, and sometimes even written on the gun, Commando, although this isn't actually marked Commando. I should also point out, once upon a time, SIG would actually mark these -1 or -2. I wish they would bring that back. Instead, they're marked SG553P, P for pistol. Makes sense. This is identical in the rear to the previous gun, and really to most others. Gray-green, steel, until we get up to the front. This is the shortest common barrel at 8.9 inches with a removable muzzle device. This is kind of an A2 style flash hider, but it is Swiss made. It is on 1/2 by 28 threads, which is pretty common for newer SIGs. Earlier, the 553 and the 552s were on 14 by 1 left hand, and actually the very, very, very first 552s had a single piece barrel with a prong flash hider, which, as you might imagine, wasn't the best idea in the world. And the reason I say this is the star of the show, all this year, people have asked me and asked me and asked me for 553 SBs specifically. And I wish I had 50 or 100. I could have sold them all. For whatever reason, maybe they've been in a video game recently or a TV show. I'm not sure. Maybe people are just aware of them. It is the one that people want absolutely more than any other, probably all others combined this year. In the past, the STGW-90, PE-90, 550 was kind of the most popular. And there was even a time when the 551LB, because you just couldn't get them, was kind of the thing. But this year is the year for this little guy. While this came with the same mag as the rest, just for fun, I put a more classic shorter 20 rounder in. This was the version originally made for the 550 SGGW90 and is still very much in use in production today, even if the longer mag is becoming more common with these. And from the get-go, the 553 SB was meant to have a removable muzzle device. Many do have the 4-way regulator, this one included. This was the version that SIG expected to have a suppressor put on. Typically, they use a version of a Surefire, although Brugger and Thermat and whatnot have been used in the past as well. Same length gas system, fluted gas piston for what it's worth. Not sure if you can see up in there, but it's fluted. Actually, the 552, a very classic gun, the major difference is totally internal. The 552 and 553 externally are almost identical except for the charging handle. It's actually the bolt carrier and recoil return spring that's different from the two. The 552's was more traditional like AK. It had issues, and also it didn't allow the gun to be all that parts compatible with the rest of the family. So in the early 21st century, SIG would, SAN at that time, because they were SAN from about 2000 to 2020, would update with newer spring technology to the 553. That fixed the problems of the 552. It also meant that the bolt carrier and charging handle were now standard. By the way, the safety selector and obviously mag catch are ambidextrous. However, the charging handle and manual bolt release are not. Again, this configuration is a product of the 80s. So, hey, if it works, it works. It does the job. And it really does kind of embody the best of AR-15, AK-47, AKM, and even borrows some from the G3, other HKs, and maybe even a tad bit from the FAL, if you want to go there. And a lot of other guns have borrowed from it as well. So this in the Swiss military is typically used by special forces and other elites. It's called the STGW-07K. It's almost always a pick rail only with the folding sights, not diopters. Fun fact, in Switzerland, they actually call diopters American sights because they say Americans are the only customers still ordering these. Oh well. And again, they're usually issued with a suppressor, or at least can be, very compact, quite light for what they are. This has the 1 in 7 twist, so out of a almost 9-inch barrel, you get a full twist, barely. Although the Swiss military version is still 1 in 10, so they don't quite get a full rotation. That said, they seem to do fine with them, so hey-ho. This really is a versatile little gun with the pick rail, the diopters, the iris, threaded barrel, suppressor capable. Of course, with the barrel so short, you can't just slap a stock on without either SBRing, or since this is threaded, you could theoretically put a fake suppressor on, pin it on, go that way. Luckily, it is a standard thread, and then do that. Or of course, you can arm brace them. The arm brace adapter out of Switzerland is actually for an AR-15 M4 type tube, and those were originally made for foreign customers who wanted to run like mag pulls and whatnot on theirs, so it's a military quality device. Even though it's a steel lower, it's a very solid filling gun, and I hope the people that wanted them are happy. By the way, these mags, even though they're all polymer, no steel reinforcements, they work great, and they hold up. They're very durable and very lightweight. But some bad news. We've been going over the numbers. 20 SG553 SBs came in. So the good news is more than the 553 LB. The bad news is 20 is not nearly enough to satisfy everyone. A little good news, a batch of 553 300 blackouts is coming in, hopefully in August, so that probably means October in Swiss speak. And there's even a batch of 553Rs, R for Russian, which are chambered for 7.62 by 39, although they have the 11.9-inch two-piece barrel. So it's actually like the 553 LB we looked at, but with a removable muzzle device. So there you have it, guys. In total, for the 5.56 guns, 75 came in this time, plus some 7.51s and some other guns coming later on. Not a lot, but then again, this is a very niche market. Let's not kid ourselves. If too many came in, it wouldn't be good for anyone. And I'm going to tell you this, and you can believe me or not, the importer, JDI, San Imports, Dave, while of course he's making money, his margins are much thinner than you can possibly imagine. It's Switzerland that needs the price point we're seeing. And that's actually borne out if you look back at the 1980s. If you take the prices for the 550 and 551 from 1988, roughly $1,000, run them through a inflation calculator, they're almost identical. Around $4,000 in today's money, give or take. So, yeah, and far fewer variants came in. I think that's the cool part. Every time these come in, even like sometimes with the 551 LB, where it's a bit of a surprise, they're a little different each time. We've had some very similar to this with the pick rail, but I think only like 10 of those came in. So I don't ever foresee a time when these come in huge numbers. I think the largest numbers we've ever had were those 551s with the 16-inch barrels. A total of 400 of those came in, 50 special editions, anniversary editions, and then roughly 200 steel lower and 150 alloy. I'm just ballparking, spitballing. But the one reason they were able to knock those together, the 16-inch barrels were new old stock from the 1980s or early 90s. So, And of course, Switzerland is tied up with their own military contracts, government contracts, police contracts. These guns, while very few militaries use them in huge numbers around the world, special forces, SWAT teams, private security protection, they almost all have some. In fact, there are rumors of some in the U.S. military. Of course, then again, you get to things like the Navy SEALs, Delta, SOCOM. They have a little bit of everything, even if it's just for testing and evaluation. But I always like to give you an update anytime a new batch of Swiss goodness comes in. And I hope you weren't disappointed this time. So, as Jerry pointed out, this actually does say 551P for pistol, even though the barrel is over 16 inches. To be fair, you could shoot this single-handed. It would be an exercise, but at least it's 223, 556, or 5.6, not 308, 7.62 NATO. This is about the only way to get these in with features, and we're thankful for it. And honestly, we don't know how much longer such guns, because this isn't the only type to kind of come in this way, will be allowed. But, since it is over 16 inches, there's at least not a worry about the NFA Class 3 SBRs if you were to put a shoulder stock on. Alternatively, you could brace this or put on an AR type stock back here with the Swiss made brace adapter. It's just a plate, it's pinned in, small pin, big pin, take those out. Need I say more? These really are good feeling guns, and they always come in such small numbers, and they always come in much later than any of us would really want. But they do come in. I will say that. To date, over the last 8 years, everything that JDI has said would come in and took pre-orders on did eventually make it, even if it was super duper late. It's definitely an exercise in patience. In some, there was an earlier batch that took Stanag mags. Might prefer that, but you'd be amazed how many folks want the version that takes the unique Swiss mag. And I would say these are good mags. They're not going to wear out on you, but when the guns come in, typically extra mags come in, you should grab them, get at least a couple extras. Now, you can put a Stanag lower on any of these and use AR mags, and they run perfectly well. We've talked about that in the past. So what do you think? Do you like the traditional single-piece barrel with the 2-position regulator? Are you kind of stoked for this suppressor-capable version? Last year they did a 550, the quote-unquote DMR or DMP, the dump, that was suppressor-capable. So then we've got a 551. Now, 553s were kind of always meant... That was the suppressor gun, the 553, as you kind of saw earlier. Let me know. They're nice guns. They really are. And the all-black look is really kind of good for like that French Guine or police, because a lot of the police guns are either gray and black or just all black, whereas the Swiss military is more your gray-green. But let me know. And like I said at the beginning of the video, yeah, if you'd like to help out at the range, we're going to probably start putting up steel targets with names on them for people who donated. It's still time throughout August if you want to sign up. And if you pay for a whole target, it'll be yours. You can pick a saying. If you just want to pitch in a couple of bucks on a target with other folks, you can vote on which shape and size it can be. And if you don't want to be associated with a target, I am going to be making a plaque to kind of put on the wall of the shooting shack, as I've been calling it, itself. But we'll knock that together when it's not stickly outside. I'm happy to find out that the term stickly has kind of stuck. So, yeah, as we kind of round out the end of July, beginning of August, had to share these with you. Don't worry if we don't post many videos. We're fine. All's well. At least I hope so. Past me to future me. But no, that's part of the plan. Plus, we've been doing videos constantly since late winter. And just need time to unwind and figure some things out. Relax. Plus, J-Ro might be taking a little trip to the Amazon. The store, of course. He's a big fan of Jeff Bezos. Anyway, let me know what you think. If you haven't, check out some of the previous Swiss SIG videos. And next time some guns come in, we'll keep you up to date. It's kind of what we've done since the beginning of JDI. But what do you think of the diopter pick rail combo? Would you prefer just a straight pick rail, so it's a little bit longer back here? Or do you like just straight diopters? Or something else? Oh, let us know. Let's have a discussion, as always. That's the most enjoyable part. Also, I will get back to doing live streaming on Thursdays. Sorry, guys. I just had some things. With that, this is Misha. And it's about dinner time, so we'll catch you after some po' boys and fries. Catch you very soon next time.